Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordyn and welcome to my January and February combined double monthly wrap up. I don't have a great reason that I combined January and February. I really just kept putting off filming my January wrap up, and then next thing I knew it was the last week of February, so I decided to just do one video combining both months. This actually works pretty well because I do include a lot of the books that I'm reading in reading vlogs, so most of the books that I've read I've already talked about, and that makes wrap ups either a little bit repetitive if I'm saying the same things over again, or really short if I don't repeat what I already said and just point you to those videos. So combining 2 in 1 allows me to do that but still have a relatively substantial video to put out. If you have seen my monthly wrap-ups in the past, I do like to do stats and graphs at the beginning, talk about trends in my reading and things I like to track throughout the year. I have started tracking some additional information this year in 2023 that I have not tracked in the past, including diversity representation in the books that I read as well as publisher information. Right now it's just so that I can track it throughout the year and then I can reflect and see if I want to make any conscious changes going forward. But let's just go ahead and get into the wrap-ups. First things first, in January I read 18 books and I DNF'd 2 of them. I will talk about the books that I DNF'd, but they will not be included in my stats. 17 of the 18 books that I read were for videos, and 1 was for a book club that I was participating in. For the genres that I read, not a very diverse month in that respect. I read 9 mystery thrillers, 8 contemporary romances, and those 2 categories are because of the videos that I made in January. And then I read 1 historical fiction. For my ratings in January, like I mentioned, I had 2 DNFs. I had 1 star, 1 2-star, 8 3 stars, 8 4 stars, but unfortunately 0 5-star books. And all of that works out to an average rating of 3.28, which is definitely on the lower end and not the best way to start my reading year. As far as formats that I read in January and how I obtained books, 7 books I read physically, and they are books that I own on my physical TBR. 5 books were ones that I read physically and had checked out physically from the library. And 6 of the books were ones that I read completely via audio and do not own and did not check out physically from the library. Author identification. I read 17 books by female authors and only 1 book by a male author. And as far as diversity representation, 10 of the 18 books, which is 56%, contained some kind of diverse characters or representation in terms of race, sexuality, disability, etc. I am happy with that. I would love to see it even higher considering that I am including all forms of diversity in that statistic. But definitely at the end of the year, I will do a deeper dive into what types of diversity I've been focusing on and how I can continue to improve that going forward. And then the last thing I said I was tracking is publishing information. I am very new to tracking publishers and imprints and parent companies and all of that, so this might not be 100% accurate, but I'm doing my best. What I found in January is that 14 of the 18 books were published by imprints owned by one of the big 4 publishing companies. So that includes 6 Penguin Group books and 3 Random House books, which are both owned by Penguin Random House, 3 HarperCollins imprints, and 2 Hachette. Whereas I only read 4 books independently published either by independent authors or independent book presses. So that includes 2 books published by Sourcebooks, 1 published by Amazon Publishing, and 1 book published by Tor. While I'm in the statistics mode, let's go ahead and talk about February. In February, I read 16 books and had 0 DNFs that I can remember. 11 of the books were already featured in videos. 1 was an ARC that I needed to read in advance of its publication. And then 4 books were just kind of quote unquote for fun. For genres, we had a little bit more diversification than January. I only read 2 mystery thrillers. I read 9 contemporary romances, 3 historical fictions, 1 sci-fi, and 1 fantasy. My ratings were also a bit better in February. I had 0 1-star books, 2 2-stars, 7 3-stars, 4 4-stars, and 3 5-star books. I'm so happy I had 3 of them after having 0 in January, and that all works out to an average rating of 3.5. As far as formats, 5 of the books I owned physically and read physically. 8 of the books I do own a physical copy of, but I listened to the audio version. And then 3 books I listened to the audio only and I don't have a physical copy. For author identification, I read 15 books by female authors and again only had 1 male author. And in terms of diversity representation, 10 of the 16 books, which is 63%, contained some kind of diverse representation, including race, sexuality, or disability. I will point out that there was a lot of intersectionality because a number of the books I read were written by, for example, a BIPOC author and also had disability or mental health representation included within them, or LGBTQIA. But I am happy that 9 of those 10 diverse books were written by Black authors, and then the 1 additional that I'm including is a white male author who wrote a gay romance. For publishing information, I also seemed to do a little bit better this month in that only 6 of the 16 books that I read were published by one of the big 4 publishers. So 2 by Penguin Group within Penguin Random House, 2 by Hachette, 1 HarperCollins imprint, and 1 Simon & Schuster. And 10 of the books were published independently, again, either independently by the author or by independent presses, including Tor, 2 by Kensington Books, Joy Revolution, Grey Wolf Press, Scribe Chick Media, Soho Press, 1 Audible original, and 2 completely independent that I couldn't find any actual press name to follow. Again, pretty new to tracking this information, so there could be something that's incorrect there. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about the actual books that I read. Because the majority of the books that I read I've already featured in videos, I won't go too into depth into those books' synopses or what my thoughts were on them. I will just tell you what video I featured them in, and then if you're interested in that additional information, you can go watch those videos and get those deeper thoughts. So starting off in January, the very first book that I read was the final book in a Book of the Month reading vlog that I did, and that is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This is a historical fiction book that I gave 4 stars. And then the bulk of my January reading were 2 different Goodreads Choice Awards videos where I read all of the nominees in the categories of mystery, thriller, and romance so that I could rank them and give my informed opinion on which book should have won the categories. So for mystery thrillers, I don't own most of the books that I read. I ended up getting them from the library or through audiobook services. The one that I do own is All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers. This ended up being my favorite of the whole entire video. No spoilers, but I did give this 4 stars. And then I also read The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James, which I gave 3 stars. The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, which I gave 2 stars. The Housemaid by Freida McFadden, which I gave 4 stars. Killers of a Certain Age by DeAnna Raybourn, I gave 3 stars. And The Maid by Nita Prose, which I gave 4 stars. Again, those are all mystery thrillers. I do have a lot of thoughts about those books and the category as a whole, so definitely check out that video if you have not seen it already. For the romance category, I had to read a few books in series, so multiple books by the same author. I'm not sure where the first in the series went, but I did read The Fine Print as well as Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. These are books 1 and 2 in the Dreamland Billionaires series. I really enjoyed both of these, and I gave The Fine Print 3 stars and Terms and Conditions 3 stars. Though now thinking back on it, I might give The Fine Print, the first book, 4 stars instead. I also read both It Happened One Summer and Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. Those are a series about 2 sisters going through romances. The first one I gave 4 stars, and the second one I gave 3 stars. I also read Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. I was pleasantly surprised by this one and gave it 4 stars. And then I read Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. I was expecting good things out of this one, so I will say I was pleasantly unsurprised to also give this one 4 stars. And then I read Twisted Love and Twisted Hate by Anna Huang. This did not go so well for me. I gave Twisted Love 1 star and I DNF'd Twisted Hate because I just could not do it. That is not at all the type of romance for me. Go check out that video if you want more of my thoughts about what it is and why I did not like it. But all in all, that Goodreads romance video was very enlightening to say the least. The only other reading vlog I did in January was the New Year New Reads readathon vlog, where I participated in that readathon hosted by a bunch of my friends here on BookTube. I ended up attempting 3 books, but only finishing 2 for that video. I read A Small Game by Blair Braverman and gave it 3 stars. Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng, which I gave 3 stars. And then I also tried reading Winter Garden by Kristin Hannah, but ended up DNFing it. That blog has all of my thoughts on those few books if you would like to go back and watch it. And then the only other book that I read in January and did not feature in a vlog, again, I read it for a book club. I read Off the Deep End by Lucinda Berry. This was my friend Jessie's pick for her Sleep When I'm Dead book club. In January, she had my friend Lena on for their live show, and they also had actually Lucinda Berry herself, which was super cool. I highly recommend going back and watching that recording of that live if you haven't seen it yet and you're interested in hearing Lucinda Berry talk about her work a little bit. But this is her latest release. It's a mystery thriller about this mother who is driving in a car with her son and her son's friend in the back seat. She ends up going off the road and landing in like a lake or a river or something. And as she's escaping her car, she tries pulling her son out with her. But when she gets out of the water, she realizes she didn't save her son, she saved her son's friend. Her son ends up dying as a result of that accident, and she has to live with the fact that she saved the wrong kid. And then it just spirals from there. This book was pretty crazy, not only in like the events, what happens, but also in the characters' choices and relationships and what is all revealed in the end. I ended up giving it 3 stars because it was just a little bit too much for me, and it was a lot of intermingled like domestic type drama, which is not my favorite unfortunately, but I thoroughly enjoyed that book club discussion of this book. and getting some insight into Lucinda Berry's writing process and her process of writing this book specifically. So now moving into my February books. Again, I will feature the ones that I've already talked about in videos first and then talk about the ones that I haven't talked about yet. So the first video that I put out in February was me talking about books that I have read that were my friends' favorite books of 2022, and I featured 4 books in that video. First was The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. This is a horror book that I ended up reading 4 stars. And then I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which is a very beloved fantasy book, a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but was super pleasantly surprised to love it and give it 4 stars as well. Then I read The Lost Girls of Willowbrook by Ellen Marie Wiseman. This is a historical fiction book that I thought was perfectly fine and I gave 3 stars. And then the last book that I featured in that video is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is a contemporary romance book. And the biggest pleasant surprise of them all is that I gave this book 5 stars. It was my first 5-star read of 2023 and I couldn't be happier that I finally got it with this book. Alright, the next video that I posted in February was my Blackathon vlog. Blackathon was a month-long readathon hosted by Jessie over at Jessie on YouTube. They announced that there was a 48-hour readathon within the month-long readathon, and so that's what I attempted to participate in. My actual readathon ended up going a little bit longer than 48 hours, but I still really enjoyed the books that I read for that weekend. They included Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. This is a young adult romance that I gave 3 stars. And then I read She Would Be King by Wayette Moore, which is a historical fiction book that was also recommended by Jessie as a buddy read for the readathon and one of the teams that you could join if you were participating in that way. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And then I ended the readathon on a double high note because I read Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan, which is a very hard-hitting emotional romance. Definitely look up Trigger Warnings if you are thinking of picking this one up, but I loved it so much and I gave it 5 stars. It's probably my favorite book that I read the entire month. And I also read Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This is a historical fiction / sci-fi book that includes time travel and is considered somewhat of a modern classic. I absolutely loved this one as well. I gave it 5 stars. I knew I would love it and I finally picked it up and I'm so glad that I did for that video. The final video that I posted in February was my Aardvark reading vlog. Just went up. Definitely go check it out if you have not seen it yet. I read 4 books for this video. The first was a mystery thriller called All the Dark Places by Terry Parleto. This one was fine. I gave it 3 stars. Honestly don't remember that much about it at this point. Then I read a contemporary book called Aesthetica by Ali Rowbottom. This was not my thing. I gave it 2 stars, as well as the next one, The Marsh Queen by Virginia Hartman. This is a contemporary book, or possibly like a very slightly historical fiction with a little bit of a mystery interspersed. Also gave it 2 stars. But we were redeemed in that video. I did have one winner, and that was Liar, Dreamer, Thief by Maria Dong. This is a mystery thriller with a neurodivergent main character who's trying to solve a mystery about one of her coworkers. I gave this one 4 stars, but had a really enjoyable reading experience, so if you want to hear me talk even more about it, you've heard it enough. It's in the vlog. So now, last but not least, we can talk about the books that I read in February and haven't talked about in video form yet. The first is Broken Perfect Lies by Katie Wismer. This is a book that I did receive an e-arc for to review in advance of its publication date, but I did go ahead and order the paperback version as well because I am a big fan of Katie Wismer. She actually makes videos here on YouTube about being an author and writing her books. She is independently published. This is a contemporary book that she mainly classifies as a romantic suspense about our main character, who is like a Hannah Montana equivalent. She is a pop star, but she has a secret identity for when she's not on stage performing, and she develops a romance with her bodyguard in this book. Though there is a lot more to it than that, it's definitely a little bit darker in tone than I was expecting going in, which I did like. It's not my favorite thing that I've read of all time, but I had a good time with it. I do enjoy romantic suspense as a genre, and I will be super excited if this is a genre that Katie Wismer decides to continue to write. I ended up giving this one 3 stars because I did get a little bit bored in the middle and was waiting for the suspense and action to pick up. It definitely did at the end, but I was hoping it would happen sooner. And then I also had a few nitpicky things while reading this book. I think it's partially because I do watch Katie's videos, and so I've heard her talk about things that she often does in her books that she has to go back and edit or take out. And one of the things she talks about is her like crutch words, or things that she puts in the book a million times and then has to go and search for all of the times they appear in the text and then either replace them with a word or take them out completely. And I think I found one that she didn't notice, and that is the word hell. Not talking about hell, but using it as like an interjection, or saying like, he did this, hell, he even did this. That happened a lot in this book. And I am not at all an editor or an authority on writing, so I don't think Katie needs me to tell her how to edit her own books, especially because she is a professional editor. But again, I think hearing her talk about that in her videos while writing this book and her other books, I think that put that in my mind, so it just made it a little bit easier to pick out, which is an interesting thing about reading a book from someone that you know or have seen videos from online. So again, generally enjoyed this book, and if this sounds interesting to you, definitely go check it out at the link below. Okay, and then the last 4 books I have to talk about are also all romances. I actually intended to participate in the X's and O's readathon, which happened in February and was romance themed, but it ended up overlapping with a trip I took to Arizona, so I wasn't able to vlog and it kind of just fell apart. But these are the books that I did end up reading on that trip. The first is The Romantic Agenda by Claire Kahn. This is a romance book about an asexual main character who is also an Instagram influencer. Her and her best friend have some unresolved feelings for each other, and I thought it was going to be a friends to love romance between them, but it's actually between her and another character. And I did enjoy this. I enjoyed the asexual representation. I do think some of the humor didn't quite vibe with me. I didn't find all of it funny, but overall I enjoyed it, I had fun with it, and I gave it 3 stars. And then I read You and I Rewritten by Chip Pons. This is a male-male romance about 2 men who work in the publishing industry, and this was an absolute delight. I really enjoyed this. For being a pretty short book, I thought it had a really fun plot, really likable main characters, a really adorable romance that was a little insta-lovey, but it was kind of nice that they weren't struggling with the like, is he out, am I out situation. They were both just out and could enjoy each other's company and romance without any shame or anything. This was also pretty hard-hitting. There definitely are trigger warnings for alcoholism, death of a parent, panic attacks, parental abandonment, grief, PTSD, physical abuse, and military sexual trauma, all in here, and that was taken directly from the beginning of this book. He has the trigger warnings listed, which I super appreciate, but in general, I really enjoyed this. This is a debut novel, and I definitely will be keeping an eye out for whatever Chip Pons puts out next, because this was great, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Whiteout, which is actually written by a bunch of authors. So Danielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. A bunch of those are authors that I've read other books by and absolutely loved. This is this author group's 2nd book. The first book they put out is called Blackout, and it was actually a bunch of short stories about a bunch of different characters who were all experiencing the same blackout in New York City and finding romance during that night. This is similarly about a group of characters who are all in different places during a whiteout or a blizzard in Atlanta, and again about them finding romance. This is not a bunch of short stories. It is all one interconnected story, which I did enjoy more than the first one. I don't think short stories really work for me. This one was definitely more young adult in nature, so I didn't find it super impactful or profound, but I do think it did what it was setting out to do well. And if it sounds like something you would enjoy, I would recommend it. I gave it 3 stars, and will definitely continue to pick up books by all of these authors. And then last but not least, in February, I read Coming Home by Kennedy Ryan. As I already mentioned, I had a 5-star book by Kennedy Ryan in this month already, so I was excited to pick this one up. It's actually an Audible original contemporary adult romance that was only a few hours long, so I would say it's more of a novella or a short story than it is a full-length novel. And that's actually the main reason I didn't love this one. I thought it was a very cute setup. It's about these 2 main characters who went to high school together, and there was an attraction there, but nothing ever worked out, and now they're coming back for their high school reunion and rekindling a romance. And it was cute, but it was definitely missing the trademark Kennedy Ryan emotional depth that I've come to love about her novels. Because this one was so short, I just didn't have time to do that, so I gave it 3 stars. So that took a little bit of a while, but I hope you enjoyed my January and February wrap-ups. Please let me know if you have read any of the books that I mentioned and what your thoughts were. Or you can let me know if any of these books are on your TBR, if I've convinced you to pick them up or possibly to not pick them up based on my thoughts. But other than that, I don't think I have anything else, so thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.